Testing. Testing audio. Testing audio. Much better. Woohoo! Woohoo! Alrighty. Get this out of the way. So I just sent out a link to what I hope is a decent live stream of today's class. If one of you guys want to check it and see if I've got audio levels on there, I'd appreciate it. I think I've got that problem fixed. Nice. Testing, testing. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I see you.
And is the audio quality okay?
Yeah, it's pretty laggy though.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll definitely lag by a couple of, like maybe by a good minute, but. Because believe it or not, I'm doing the whole thing off of a Rocket Hub, a Rogers 5G Rocket Hub. It's actually doing a little better than the school's connection did. It's cool though, because it means I can do this from wherever, right? Which is pretty nice. So let's see if I can get the blackboard in there. Sort of, kind of. somebody's snagging a tripod for us. So today should be a good one, guys. We're going to do some pretty significant stuff today. We are driving towards being able to do what we call dynamic templating. So the idea is, up to now, everything we've been doing has been pretty static, right? Our pages, we've hand-coded them all. We've done all the HTML and CSS for them. We're going to change that up now. We're going to start doing it dynamically. Excellent. Perfect. I can probably get this to be right about here. You know, it'd be awesome if I could somehow get like Tim Hortons sponsorship out of doing this. Get my coffee for free. That would be incredible. There's got to be a release on this. There we go. I wanna run. Apologize if anyone is watching the stream right now. This probably looks insane. Well, pretty good. Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. Make do with this. All right. So shall we get into it? Let's get going. All right, so let's do a little bit of review just to where we are up to now. Okay, so up to now, we learned about something called the page flow and how all HTML pages, whether it's a site or whether it's an application, are composed of boxes, right? Now these boxes always have the same four parts to do with them. So pop quiz time. If I start drawing the box model here, I'm going to start off with this, and then something like this. Can you tell me what we call some of the pieces here? What about this one right here? What's that? The content. So we're kind of 1 out of 4 now. What about this area right in here? What would we call that? I heard it. Oh, no, the other one. Padding, exactly. So padding right in here. And then for margin, it's a little bit of a trick because you actually need to have 2 of these boxes here. And then this area in between here, we call the margin. And the other one that we haven't, made a ton of use of is the border, which is this little one right down here. Okay, so if you think boxes like this, any layout that you have technically is always going to be a grid. A grid is the only way of arranging boxes beside each other. Even if you have only 2 boxes, that's still a 2-cell grid, right? So in a page, you have to have a way of putting these boxes either beside each other or on top of each other. So if you remember the early lesson that we did for navigation, we had a situation where here's our page, and we wanted to have a navigation with buttons lined up top here, right? But when the page gets very narrow, we wanted to have them stack instead. Now I like to do this lesson because it's a good illustration of the properties of display, right? And how they work with page flow. So if we're saying that every page is composed of boxes like this, and those boxes have to go beside each other or on top of each other, the display property is what allows us to set that. So for this one up here, where they're side by side, what display property would allow us to achieve that kind of a layout? You got 3 options, 3 things we've covered for the display property.
Are you asking for a specific one?
Yes.
Well, I'm sorry to hear what you want to do.
For this one up here, where we have our boxes, so think of these boxes, don't think of the content, think of the boxes themselves. And if we want to have these boxes line up side by side like this across the page, what display property would allow us to do that? Inline, exactly. My God, you guys are making me dance today. If you know, throw a hand up or shout it out. I'm on YouTube here. Don't make me look like a fool. All right. So then, what about this one here, where they're lining up on top of each other? What display property might let us do that? Block. I knew you had that. Now we did one other display property, and it's the one that allows us to completely get rid of something from the page. What value is that? Dimitri. That's what I said, dude. Dominic. Yeah.
Like visible none.
You are correct. It's none, but not visible. It would be display none. Yeah. So those are our major properties. You know, these, if we're thinking in, so we got our inline, which is basically side by side. We got our block, which is on top of each other. And we have our none, which basically nukes it right out of the page. Okay? So this is kind of our big, broad strokes.
When do we use block in mind?
Okay, so I haven't covered inline block because it is a little bit newer for CSS3. It won't work in all browsers. But to your point, it allows you to put things inline like this, but you might have noticed like some of these inline things, they might have different heights, right? And the inline block allows you to still put them in line, but have them line up by the bottom or by the top so that you get a nice alignment across the whole thing, which is pretty useful. I do use it. But I haven't really covered it because there's other ways of achieving this that work in more browsers. So, but feel free to use it. But if you use it, make sure to set your vertical align property with it as well. Otherwise, there's really no point to using it other than using an inline. Yeah, good question. So, okay, so this gets us to working with the page flow, but it doesn't get us to the point where we can do everything that we want to do. So the next major CSS property that kicks in my opinion, is the position property, because the position allows us to step outside of the normal page flow to manipulate it a little bit. So take, for instance, one of the properties we covered, which is the position relative, right? So if you're lining up your blocks, putting them into a page, so let's say we've got a page like this, and we've sort of chopped it up like this, and we've got a block right here, and it's got some content and so forth, but we want to like push it over a little bit. We want to nudge it over so it's actually over here. Position relative is going to allow us to do that, right? So when you set something other than position static, you're basically telling the browser, I want to disregard the layout rules for this piece of content. I want to set it myself. So position relative is unique in that it will still reserve this space that it would have occupied, and it won't allow all these other elements to collapse when it lifts it out of there and moves it over a little bit. Now the way that we move it over, the way that we set how much we want to offset this box is with, things like top and left. When we specify top and left, we're telling the browser, go to where the top would have been, and whatever number I give you, push off from that. Same thing with left. We're saying go to where the left would have been and push off however many pixels. And so by doing this, we're able to lift the content out of the page, move it over a little bit, and it'll do one more thing as well. It'll give it a higher Z index. Guys, remember what the Z index property is for? Exactly. So as soon as we set a position other than static, it's going to change the Z index. It's going to try and figure out what is the top Z index it can use, lift it out, and move it over. Now, as a result, if we had some content back here, this content could be covered up, right? Because this is no longer in the page flow, this content isn't going to listen to whatever we do here. It's going to stay where it is. So that means our content could be floated over top, and it could obscure some of this content behind here. So it's something like, you'll use relative positioning all the time, but you just have to be aware of the way that it affects the page flow, or I guess we could say the way it doesn't affect the page flow, right? Because the page flow is still going to keep this open and blank back here, okay? The relative position is very closely associated to the absolute position, all right? So absolute position is probably the closest thing you have to the simple XY coordinate system that you have inside of most software, right? Flash, even 3D Studio Max, After Effects, and so forth. They all have this really straightforward XY that you use to position something. We don't really have that in HTML and CSS. The reason being that originally HTML and CSS were designed for text, right? So their rules are all related to typography, which is why we have things like padding and margin rather than an X and Y. But absolute positioning is very close to an XY coordinate system, because you can just say top left, and those are the exact same as a Y and an X. And it will stay locked to wherever you position it. It won't move around with the page flow, but you have to be careful because this can break your responsive design. All right, so on top of all this stuff that you sort of have to get used to, and positioning things based on typography rules rather than like visual XY rules, now we have to throw in the whole idea of a non-fixed frame, right? Responsive design. So when you do an absolute position and you lock something absolutely, it may not react very well with responsive. It's one of the biggest deal breakers in terms of your responsive design. So for myself, I will use absolute positioning, but I tend to use it on things that are small, like an icon or an avatar picture or something like that, right? Because even if it gets down to like a 320 pixel screen, if I've done the rest nicely in terms of responsive, it'll still be, basically where I want it to be on that small screen. Now, anybody can remember what is the trick to using absolute positioning? There's one gotcha that you have to remember with that, like all the time. We only talked about it briefly, so I'll let you off the hook on it. But the idea is this. If you want to use absolute positioning, you have to use it inside of a relatively positioned element, or another absolute that's inside of a relative. Somewhere along the line, there has to be relative positioning. Otherwise, when you set your absolute position, it will take its coordinate from the top left of the browser window itself, right? So you may be trying to set a little icon inside of this area here, and you've given a top and a left that would put it there, but somehow it winds up floating over here somewhere. If you see that happen, this can really bust the rest of your design. Like if you were counting on flowing things around that absolute position thing, if you see that happen, check this guy. He probably needs to be set with a relative position. And as soon as you do that, it'll take its top left information from here, and now you're in business with the icon where you want it to be. So that's one to keep an eye out for. Okay. I mean, that is the whirlwind tour of how layout and positioning is done. Now, if you were to try and do your entire layout using positioning and so forth, it would quickly become an unworkable mess, very, very hard to deal with. So what we've done is progressed along to using a grid system, which is, the most common way of doing layout today, since most layouts need to be multi-column and position different chunks of content around the page and be responsive. So some of the really common ones that you'll see used are like Bootstrap or Foundation, and those are awesome, and they do a good job. But I want you guys to understand what they're doing for you. So we've actually rolled our own little grid system, but we've used the same kind of naming convention that they do. So if you wish to, in the future, move along to Bootstrap or something like that, you would find the naming convention to be the exact same, and it should be pretty easy for you to get started with it. To refresh your memory on the grid system, let's talk about how far we've gone right now, because we're actually using it in our latest example, which is the activity feed, okay? So let me just clear some of this off here. So we covered box model and the pieces of that. Talked about margin. Talked about position. Talked about display with block, inline, and none. And now we're going to talk about the grid, okay? So to create our activity feed, if you're not familiar with it, the activity feed is basically a list view, a very, very common kind of UX element you'll find today because it works really nicely on mobile devices. So typically it'll look like, if this is my mobile screen, well, let's block in the standard pieces that we find inside of apps that have now made their way over into web apps as well. So you're gonna have something like a status bar sometimes, you're gonna have a toolbar. Toolbar is probably gonna have a little settings area, maybe a search field kind of thing. Maybe what do we call this button? It's got a funny name. The hamburger, yeah. Which personally I think is a Big Mac due to the 3 layers there. So we're gonna have that. And then a list view is gonna look kind of like this. You're gonna have like some kind of an icon or avatar picture or graphic or something, then probably some kind of title, then maybe like a little description, and probably a little divider, And so this is really, really easy for people to scroll on a mobile device. You can just kind of flick it with your thumb and scroll very easily. And it's meant to have no more than like 2 lines of text in the description here and 1 line for the title itself, according to like Google standards, which it's up to you how you want to do it, but you could do something and I think it looks terrible. I do something, you think it looks terrible. So the standard I'm going by is Google standard, just so we've got something to agree on. Hopefully nobody utterly hates Google standards, because if so, you're out of luck, because that's what we're using. So the idea here is, this can be used for a lot of different purposes. It could be latest activity, maybe for a site's members. It could be, these are my latest blog posts, or these are my new portfolio examples, kind of thing. And typically you'll tap them and click through to the content area here. So this is what we were working on building. And in the last class, we actually got as far as having this render on the screen. Now, to refresh your memory with how we're using the grid here, typically what we want to do is take the entire thing and wrap it into one column, right? Now, the reason why we do that is because, let's say in our design, we want to pull this out and drop it into another area of the site. Maybe we want to move it off to the side and have it in a section or something like that. If we're wrapping this inside of a single one column, we can very easily do that, right? We can, let's say, for instance, we've got a page design where we want to do something like this, and we want to drop that into here. We totally can now, right? This would be a grid, 2-column grid, but then inside of this, we'd drop our single one column. And everything would just work, because that's the beauty of responsive. It doesn't really care how many pixels it has to work inside of. It'll just adapt to whatever you flow it into. So to achieve that, we need to keep away from hard pixel numbers. So our grid that we're using is created using percentages rather than hard pixel numbers. So what I mean by that is this. Take a look at our first item. Our first feed item here. What we've really got is a little grid. Okay? So in the first cell of the grid is where we're putting our graphic. Then we've got text descriptions in the middle here. And then at the end, we've got another chunk that is basically just a spacer. And the trick with the grid system is that these percentages should equal up to 100%. So if we want a 3-column like this, and in the middle we want more width, well, what we're really saying basically is in this first one here, we want about 20%. Then we're going to match it with 20% width over here. Well, that equals up to 40%. So our center area, how much room do we want to give it? 60, exactly. Okay? So we create a grid where basically we have 20% here, 60% here, and 20% here. Now, if it was following the usual rules of the browser, we'd wind up with something like this. Right? Which is not what we want. So the way that we get around that is by using a property called the float and setting it to left. Can anybody describe for me what does the float property do?
It's things side by side.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
when it detects that there's something there, it floats it to the left or right.
Yeah.
Top or bottom.
Yeah. So the trick is all of our columns should all have a float left. That way they'll just keep stacking up to the left until it gets to 100%, and that's why it's important that it equals 100%, so that the next one bumps down to the row below, okay? So it's a bit of a trick. And here's how it's doing it. If you want to remember what float left and float right are doing, remember what happens when you set something as block, okay? Remember in the very first class, we did a little H1 tag that said like, Tim is awesome. True. Okay, so then we know everything goes inside a block, right? So here's what our little box model looks like. There's our content. But what happens is this. If this is my whole page right here, the way the browser achieves that stacking, the way it makes them go on top of each other, it sticks in its own little column that fills up the rest of the space. And that's what forces the next piece to be down here on the next area. When we say float left, what we're really doing is saying, don't make this. Okay? And then the behavior naturally kicks in where the next chunk tries to, the next chunk tries to fit itself inside of here, right? So you sort of start to see why, like how this whole thing works together. Now understanding, how it works and how it does what it does is one thing. Designing for it is something else. Because you have to start looking at your design and thinking in terms of how would I slice this up? How would the columns work in order to make this design functional? And then on top of that, you have to start thinking like, and what happens when it does this? The responsive aspects to it, you have to start thinking about as well. So over time, people started developing sort of design patterns that work in this environment. Things like, here's your page, navigation locked up here, carousel type of deal here, 3 content chunks here that describe products, team description over here, and a little latest news or something like that, right? And you see this type of design becoming more and more popular to the point where like Bootstrap even has some of these templates built in that you can use and so forth. It's up to you to figure out how much you want to conform to these design standards, because they work very well, okay? And depending on how adventurous your client is, like if they're a financial client, for instance, you're probably going to reach for something standard like this. You're not going to screw around too much, because number one, these type of designs, these type of templates are primarily meant for legibility, which is probably the number one important thing with financial clients, okay? And you'll count on content itself inside of Carousel or what have you to add a little bit of flavor and put some stock photography, right? So we're going to pick up the lesson today with this little feed exercise here. So we're going to do a little review of that. Question?
I was wondering if you could take a look at my code real quick, because I never use the spacer for 20%, but it still aligns without its stack.
You probably are all right. Yeah. Technically, you don't have to put that other spacer in there. It'll still work, but you might want to put it in there because as we continue, people will use that area for like action icons and things like that. So if you wind up wanting to actually put a little bit of stuff in there, you're going to want that div in there as a spacer. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. But I will take a look at it too. Maybe we'll throw it up on the screen or something. That'd be awesome. Okay, so I'm going to bring up the CodePen session for this. Have you guys all got a feed? Hands up who doesn't have a working feed yet. Ah, okay. But you did. I saw yours.
I know, that's what you want.
If you can see it on the screen, then that's all we're after right now. Okay. So what I will suggest for you guys then is if you need to, fork the one that I'm going to be using in order to keep going today. Obviously, it's better to do it yourself, but we're going to do 2 things today. Number one, we're going to get filtering working. I can't remember if I showed this group filters working. So being able to click that little settings button and filter the content here based on whether it's blog posts or portfolio items or something.
You showed us it worked.
We went like super fast, right? Yeah, okay. So we're going to spend just a little bit more time on that to get that working for everybody. And then we're going to drive forward from there into some really cool stuff. So right now, for us to add items into this activity feed, we basically do a copy and paste, right? We go into the HTML, we copy the feed item, paste it in, and then we can maybe change it to be a blog type or portfolio type or something like that. And that's good, but the way that this would usually be done is for us to create one of these and then use code to repeat it and flow into it the content that we want. So what kind of content do we have in our feed items here? What are some of the things that we have inside of each one of these little chunks? Yes, we can set the type of them, yep. But for the content itself, we have an icon. What else have we got inside of here? Title, description, yeah. So if we think about it, and yes, and the divider line as well, we want those things for every single one of these items. And that to me says template. Anytime you find yourself copying and pasting, you can probably create a template and do it dynamically. There's a few reasons for it. One is just avoiding human error, right? Because like copying and pasting is actually extremely dangerous in code, right? Like you miss one little character or the end of a div or something like that, and the whole thing just blows up on you. So the less we can copy and paste, the better off we're going to be. The other portion of this is that if we can make this dynamic, it means that we could make this thing driven by a database. Now, why would we want to do something like that? Any ideas?
So it'll work easier it'll work better on a server?
Yeah, yeah. For instance, would allow us to have a content management system, right? So maybe you've got members of your team that don't know how to do all this code, and you could add them on and have them putting latest updates inside of here. A really good example of that would be Facebook. They've made a couple of bucks off of doing this, right? What we're creating here, it's very, very similar to the Facebook wall, isn't it? You know? So that is all completely driven off a database using some kind of templating, which is what we're going to do today. It would also allow you to do things like user-submitted content, things like reviews, for example. So we're driving towards, I don't think I want to take you guys down the route of showing you how to completely set up servers and databases and all this kind of thing. That could pretty much be a semester on its own. But thankfully, there's a really, really good service we can use, which is called Firebase. Have you guys heard of that one? I know you have. You were in the other class. I know you have. Not you guys. Have you guys heard of Firebase? Oh my God, it is so cool. All right, so you will see today, we will actually get this thing dynamically driven, and we won't have to set up a database or anything like that. It's a service a small startup company created for real-time data. Do you remember in a previous class I showed that app I had made in Polymer and allowed you to click on the little hearts and stuff to favorite, different posts? That was running off Firebase. So we're going to make use of that as well. And the way that we'll do it is we'll get your feed pulling from my Firebase account. When that's working, you'll be able to set up your own Firebase account and then point it at your account. And so just like that, you'll be able to update your data in real time. And it's super cool because you're updating it and you can see it update right there in CodePen when you do it. It's fantastic stuff. So that's what we're shooting for. So let me jump into CodePen. I'm going to get the example up. Testing audio. Yeah, I still got audio. Good. Okay. And I'll fire out the session on Basecamp and we will get rocking. Are you guys fairly comfortable with what we described in that quickie walkthrough of what we've been learning up to now? I mean, obviously I'm going pretty quick on that stuff at this point, but it's because we've covered it a few times. If you feel like you understand it pretty decently, your goal should just be repetition, right? Practice, practice, practice. Make grids, make layouts, like do it over and over and over again, just so that you drive it into your head. Because if you feel good, like you understand it pretty decently, I guarantee you a month later it will be completely gone unless you actually, get in there and start making use of it. So the more you can, the better. To assist with that, I'll also be giving out the assignment, your next assignment today, which many of you have just already started working on, which will be to incorporate together the different pieces that you've learned. So the navigation, you're going to have the feed working along with the navigation. You're going to have a content page, that content that you made in an earlier class, something that you're into, basically, that you'd like to see a site for. You're going to take that content and you're going to use the grid to start putting it into some kind of a multi-column layout that'll be a lot nicer than just that one big centered column. You know what I mean? And then what we'll do is we'll spend a little bit of time also, showing you how you can take it from CodePen and put it on your own server, put it on your own hosting, so that you'll have a fully functional site that's being fed by Firebase and fully dynamic and real-time and responsive. That's awesome. For how many classes have we had now? What are we in?
Week 6 or 7.
Yeah, it's like 6 or 7 classes. Like, this ain't bad, man. All right. Yeah, I'm going to turn the camera on you guys while I'm getting this set up here. There we go. You guys might have noticed there's a bug in CodePen right now. Somehow my latest pens are not showing up on my feed. They are in there, and I contacted CodePen, and the guy who's working on it, I can't bug him too much because his wife went into labor. So I was like, yeah, you should probably go and take care of that. Don't worry about my feed right now. Okay, so let's take a look at this example right here. Send this out as an example. That should be coming to you from Basecamp.
Somewhere else I can access that other than the
Oh, type it in, man. I'm sorry. That was very mean. Okay. All right. So we've got our example here, and this is like the fully finished version. So we're just previewing it this time, and then we're going to actually go in and create this with what we've learned. We're going to go from scratch here. So, but the idea is this. So notice how we've got some red posts. We've got some green posts here. What we're doing with that is we're styling them according to what we want that activity post to be. So red for blog, green for portfolio. Okay, so take a look in the HTML here. And if I just scroll down a little bit here, we get into the feed area. Just expand this out a little bit. Close the CSS for the moment. There we go. So right down here, we get into the feed area. Let's kind of step through it for a second. Okay, so first off right here, we've got a div that has a column 1, 1 set, right? And it also has a class called feed. So that is our wrapper. That's our big holder that we're using. All the feed items are going to go into this one. So that's the one that we were talking about. Like if we wanted to, we'd be able to nest it inside of another grid in order to move it around or make it smaller, bigger, what have you. So the column 1, 1, if we were looking at CSS, we'd see that that's set to 100% width. Because we're saying it's going to be one column, and I want to use the entire thing, 1 of 1, so 100%. Nothing too crazy there. If we go inside, we get to our first feed item here, right here. But notice what else we see. We've got a second class applied, which is called blog. So that's the thing about classes and IDs. You can put multiple classes on the same element. So what we're saying here is this is a feed item, but now we're specializing a little bit in order to say, well, it's feed item, but in particular, it's a blog feed item. So if we target with the CSS selector, the class blog, we're going to be able to apply an individual style to this one item. Okay? So if we go into the CSS, and scroll down here, check it out. Here's a style for blog, right? And so we've got a few properties in here. One is the overflow hidden. The overflow hidden basically makes sure that if we've set a height property on this feed item, that nothing that extends past that will mess with our layout. It's a cropping tool, basically. So we're saying crop anything that is outside of the allowable area of this. So even if the text gets really long, it won't mess with our layout. It'll just get cropped off. And then we're setting the text color to red. And we've got this transition here, which is targeted at, well, let me ask you guys, what does the transition property do? Yeah, gets used for animation. So the way that we do it is by saying target a certain property, and if anything changes that property, whether it's JavaScript or media query or what have you, space it out. In this case, whoa, don't. Give me a second. I got a little click happy there. Hold on. Yeah, we're saying space it out over basically 1/3 of a second. So when we do that, the time lag causes the animation to kick in. And you can target pretty much any property that you want. But when you target these visual properties, then that's typically how you're going to achieve animation using a transition. Now, some of the way that this CSS is written right here is probably not the best, right? Because we were setting overflow hidden, and we're setting a transition, and it's exact same in both cases, right? So it'll work, but it's not very good. It's not the most efficient way that we could do this. A better way would be for us to, for instance, maybe apply overflow hidden and the transition to feed item, right? Because these should probably apply to all feed items. And then inside of blog and portfolio classes, just the things that are specific to those items. So in this case, the color red or color green. That would be one way to do it. Another way that we could do it would be to use a little bit of a fancy CSS selector. The same one that we're using for our columns. So remember that fancy one with the square brackets that we were using? And it allows us to say, select any class that has this little chunk of text in its class name. Remember that one? If we scroll up a little bit to where we have the rules for our columns, it's this one right here, right? So see how we've got that class and then star equals column dash, right? So what we're saying in this is select any class out of all the classes that has the phrase col dash somewhere in its name. So this gives us a lot of versatility, right? Because remember, we said the whole trick to making our grids work is to make sure that anything that we're setting as a column has a float left. And so by saying any class that has a col dash apply float left to, we're covering that scenario. So if we wanted, we could create a similar selector to this in order to target all of our feed items, right? We could create a rule. I'm not going to do it, but we could do something like this where we would say class star equals, and then, you know, looking over here, we would, in the HTML, we'd find something unique to all the feed items. You know, so we could say something like this. Feed dash, right? And then we could say overflow hidden, and what was the other one? What was the other one that we were thinking should probably be common to all the feed items? Dun, 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 dun. Transition, yeah, right? And then we wanted to target the height, and we wanted to say 0.3 seconds kind of thing, right? So that would get the job done as well. This would automatically target anything that had feed dash inside of the class name. Does that make sense? You know, this is a very powerful selector. Like, lots of interesting ways that you can use that. Okay, just wanted to illustrate that we're using it for our columns, which is like a little trick from Chris Corrier, the guy who made CSS tricks, and it works really, really great. But there's lots of interesting ways that you can do it. So I'm just going to nuke that out of there. That's not really what we're worried about. But I just wanted to point out that this CSS down here, like that could be a bit better. If you're thinking about it, you want to try and write as little CSS as you can, right? And plan it out. And sort of like with our feed items here, say, okay, what should be common across all of them? And put that in one rule. And then just bust out the unique things that you want in order to, you know, in my case, have blog items or portfolio items kind of thing. Now, the reason why we are trying to you know, do these blog items and portfolio items is because we want to be able to do some stuff like this. So right here, I've got this little settings box that I can click to open, click to close, and I can also click on these filters here. And if I click it, you can see like the red items, which correspond to the blog items, are disappearing. I can also click to make the green items, the portfolio, get out of here. There. Make these green items go away, right? Now the way that we're achieving that is based on the class names. So if I just wanted to make them, get rid of them, like if I want to, for instance, have all of the blog items not display anymore via CSS, how might I do that? Like in a really simple way. So with CSS, there's always two parts. The first part is you need a selector. You need a way of selecting the items that I want to nuke, that I want to get rid of. So how could I do it? What kind of CSS selector would I probably use in this case? Yeah, exactly. If let's say we have multiple different types of blog items, right? We've got personal blog, business blog, etc., etc. We might write one of those fancy ones with the asterisk equals, and then a chunk of the text to target all of those guys. If I've only got one type of blog item and all of those items have the blog class applied to them, it could be as simple as just using a class selector, like .blog, right? So let's say we've done that. We've written our .blog sandwich bread. What are we going to put inside of the sandwich bread if we just want to make them not be there anymore? Think of the simplest way. If you can do it with one line of CSS. And you wanted to make, yes, brother. Display none would get the job done, right? And we did that in the earlier class, but it doesn't look too nice visually when we do it that way, because they're there 1 second and then they're gone and the whole page reflows, right? So it's a good way to illustrate that when you set a display none, the page will reflow, which means that the gaps that were caused are instantly filled in with the other post and it looks kind of nasty. So we decided to do it a different way, which was instead of just doing a display none, to mess with the height property. And we're collapsing the height for the item down. Now as we do so, well, if we just set the height equal to 0, it'd be the same as saying display none, right? And the whole page would jump. But because we have a transition that is targeting the height property set to 1/3 of a second, we get a nice little zzz, a timed collapse, which is a lot easier for people to look at. Those type of effects are always a good idea to put in. Some kind of feedback based on the user action. It also allows you time in your site. Like let's say, for instance, you need to be loading some images and assets and things like that. Those little delays, your user will actually feel like the site is working faster, even though they've been delayed. Because the response to their action was immediate. That's what they care about, not necessarily how long it takes. So that little 1/3 of a second for things to collapse, that's valuable time where your site can be doing other things. So typically don't, jar the user. Don't have stuff just like appear or disappear. Put a little bit of an animation in there and the whole experience is going to feel a lot nicer. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to go back to basics and we're going to go to the activity feed just by itself. And we're going to hook up this settings box and these filters. And then probably we'll take our break around that time. And then after the break, we're going to work on making the whole thing dynamic with templating, which will be the new part of the lesson here. So let me jump to another example that doesn't have all of the fanciness on here. So, yeah, this should work nicely. Yeah. Okay. Let me take this into a shared session, and I'll fire you out a link. And I'm just going to bring up the same on the stream here. Alrighty, here we go. So to set this up, here's the order that we're going to do it in. First off, we're going to create the settings box itself, and we're going to position it right in the corner here. Okay. Then we're going to set up a little bit of JavaScript code where we add a mouse listener to the settings button itself. And we're going to use that for animating that box on and off the screen. So if you remember with the navigation example that we were doing, same thing we were doing, but over here on this side of the stage. And to achieve it, we were messing with the margin left property. And we gave that a negative value, which caused it to pull off of the stage here. And then when we animate it on, we're just changing that property in order to have it come onto the stage. And we're using the transition to time it out to like 1/3 of a second. So we're going to do pretty much exact same thing, but we're going to do it over on this side here, right? So clicking hamburger button over there brings in navigation. Clicking settings button over here brings in settings. And then we're going to have a couple of filters inside of there, maybe based on blog or portfolio, but you can, you know, whatever your idea is, whatever you're building a site for, you can figure out the categories that you want to use. I'll fire up one more computer for my notes here. Jeez, I am running out of desk space here. I have 3 computers on the go now. Okay, so let's take a look at the HTML that we got going here. And so there's our toolbar, right? So we've been doing a settings bar and a toolbar in all of our examples, including the navigation. So hopefully that should make it a little easier for you to combine these examples all together. Inside of the tools, we have our search item. Then we have our settings right there. So you can see, you know, we're going to need to give an ID to that particular icon so that we can use that ID for clicking up our, hooking up our mouse click listener, okay? Then down here, we have the end of the toolbar. And then right here, we've got a div that's class is called filters. And inside of that, we're using one of our little unordered lists to put our 2 items here. So we're basically going to take this little chunk and we're going to move it over into our example that we're working on. And then we're going to look into the CSS in order to position it where we need it to be on the right hand side and just below the toolbar there. So go ahead and start working on that. Look for the end of your toolbar and then start making this chunk right here. Go for it, and I will catch up with you in a moment. Okay, so let me jump back into here, and I'm going to join you guys in working on this one. So I'm going to look for the end of my toolbar. So we start to see where these little end of notes get pretty handy for us, right? It slows you down a little bit putting those in, but you definitely want to have them in there. Okay. So this is the chunk that you're after right there. Now, if I go to the CSS, I'm going to look for the class called filters. So here's a little tip. If you go Control F, it'll bring up a find. There we go. And so here's the important stuff in the CSS. This part is very, very similar to what we did with the navigation. We're going to use a position fixed. And when it comes to like any kind of settings or navigation or something like that, you're pretty safe using a position fixed, because whether they're on a mobile, whether they're on desktop or whatever, you pretty much want it stuck in the same place. If you think about it, right? Like a navigation is going to be stuck on the top left. This is going to be just underneath of the toolbar and stuck to the right. So position fixed is pretty good choice for us to use. So we set the position fixed. For my part, I'm setting a background to gray, and then I'm giving it a hard width and a hard height. And then right down here, I'm using the top to push it down by 58 pixels, which corresponds to 10 pixels of height for my status bar and 48 pixels of height for my toolbar. And so that's what's causing it to be right underneath. Are you guys able to see your filter box? It's showing up on there for you? Now, this right here is what's pushing it off screen, right? So I'm saying right minus 100%. So what it's going to do is it's going to go to as far right as it can, which in this case is like the right of the screen, and then push off. Now, ordinarily, if we set 100%, it will push it more onto the screen, right? Because it goes to what you've said, the right, and then any value you give it, it uses to push off from there. But because we've said negative 100%, it actually sucks it off the screen by exactly 100% of the width. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So right over here, we pushed it off the screen, and then we've put a transition, and we've said anytime the right property changes, space it out over 0.3 seconds. Okay? So inside of our code, all we have to do is enable a click handler that will change that right property. And when we do, that transition animation will automatically click in. Okay? So take a look at the JavaScript. All right, so first off, don't forget, you need jQuery for this. We're using jQuery for this, this project here. So clicking the gear, I'm using CodePen's built-in ability to bring in jQuery right down here. The other way that you could do it would be with a script tag inside of the HTML. But for convenience, I'm using that. And then for review purpose, we've got this little $sign I always use the phrase jQuery is the money because the $sign stands in for jQuery. It's just a short version of saying jQuery. So who can describe for me what does this very first jQuery function do for us? What's the purpose of that? Our very first one that we got there.
Tells the code what's going to happen.
You're on the right track.
That if the filter is open, not to do anything.
Well, you're looking inside of the function, and you're right. You're right about that for sure. But I'm saying, why do we start this with jQuery function like that?
Probably what your action is.
Yep.
Basically, everything in that function will happen after the page loads.
That's right. Yes. And that's also commented. The comment is there, my friends. It's wait for the page to be ready. Okay. Now this is really, really important, right? This is one of the major cross-browser fixes that jQuery gives you. Because one of the biggest problems in doing any of this stuff is that different browsers have a different idea of when they feel the page is loaded. Okay? They all recognize a page loading, but some of them feel like it's loaded when just the HTML is loaded, but not the images and iframes and things like that. Other browsers will say, no, it's not loaded until you have the HTML and the JavaScript and the images, and it's all over the place. So what jQuery has done is accounted for these differences across all the browsers so that it gives you one unique event that says no matter what the browser is, it's ready to go. You're safe to start using JavaScript in this thing. Because otherwise, we've already seen, what is JavaScript used for? Well, in this case, we're using it to add up some mouse click listeners, right? But what if we're trying to add that mouse click listener to something that's not loaded yet? Like let's say, for instance, the icon that we're using for our settings button wasn't actually loaded. JavaScript won't stop us from trying to add a listener to something that's not loaded, but we'll be clicking and it will never hear it. You know what I mean? So this first function is called the ready function, and it basically says, don't do any of this stuff I'm telling you to do until you're ready. It's very polite, right? So jQuery is saying, when you're ready, let's rock. And the let's rock is basically everything that you guys were identifying there. For instance, keeping track of whether the filters box is open. So to your point, you're absolutely right. The first thing that we're doing is creating a Boolean variable. And we're going to use that to keep track of whether the box is on screen or not. So over here in the CSS, the default when you arrive on this page is that it should be set to minus 100%. In other words, it'll be squished off of the screen, right? So our Boolean variable, when the page first loads and first gets ready, is to say, no, it's not visible. It's off screen. So we're saying filters open equals false. We're going to need that because this little filters button, if you're clicking it, it has two behaviors, right? You're clicking the exact same way, but in one case, it's opening it, and in one case, it's closing it. That Boolean is what's going to allow us to make the decision whether we should open or close the thing. So, first thing that we do is right here. We're using jQuery again to target the settings button and add a click handler to it, right? So we must always put this little function with the two parameters there. The function is an action word in JavaScript. When you see function, it's saying you're going to need to take some kind of action. That's just the way that JavaScript is written. It's very, very function-based language. Anytime you see function, you have to have the round parameters. If you don't have the round parameters, you're not completing, telling JavaScript that it's going to have to take some action there. Okay? So does that make sense? So we're saying right here, jQuery, listen to this settings icon. And when someone clicks on it, take the following action. Sandwich bread. And then we're putting some instructions inside of the bread, right? And what do we know about sandwich bread? What's the rule? Number one rule of sandwiches? Yes, exactly. You can't just have one bread, right? Whenever you have an opening curly brace like this, you're going to have a closing one somewhere as well. So if we're sort of like looking at these three things together, we have our HTML, which is really just a description of this box. We're saying, we want to have something called filters, and inside of it, we're going to have a list with two things, and that's it. Then when we go to the CSS, we're saying, that list, let's make it a box. We make it a box by giving it a width and height. And then we say, let's move it off the screen by squishing it over from the right by 100%. And then we're setting it up for an animation by saying, if that right, that we just squished it off screen, ever changes, well, I want you to space that out over 1/3 of a second. Okay? So the scene is set for this thing to be interactive and to work. But then we have to make use of our JavaScript to add the logic to the thing, to make that decision and say, well, if you're off screen, move on screen. If you're on screen, move off screen, and vice versa. And we need at least one variable to keep track of that, to keep it in memory, the state of that thing, whether it's open or closed. So look what we got here. Now we're inside of the click handler, and the way that we're doing the logic is with this if statement, right? So we put the if statement in order to look at that little variable we created called filters open. So when the person first arrives on the site, what's the state of that variable? So I just got to the site, it just loaded, I haven't clicked nothing. False. Exactly. So if we're looking at this statement here, we're saying, is the filters open? Well, it's not, right? So we automatically skip everything in the sandwich bread. Skip everything here, but look at this. Now we've got this little else, right? So the else says, well, if that first thing we checked wasn't true, if that was false, then here's what you should do, okay? It's a default. Inside of the else is a perfect place for us to put a default. And in which case, we're saying, change the CSS property of the filters box to 0 pixels. So can you sort of picture what would happen there? We had set the right property to be minus 100%, which pushed it off the right-hand side of the screen. If we get rid of that minus 100% and change it to 0, whoosh, onto the screen it comes, okay? But we have to do one more thing, which is to change the variable, because now the filters box is visible. It is on screen, so we have to set it to true. Okay, so now let's rewind. Let's say the thing has been clicked again. So the first time through, hadn't clicked anything, and it was off screen, and now I've clicked, and now it is on screen, and we've changed that Boolean. So let's go back again. Let's say I'm hitting the button again. So right back up here, I've clicked, so the code's going to run again, and I get to that first if. What's the value of this Boolean now in that scenario? Mm-hmm. You're 50%. Exactly, it's true now, right? So after I've clicked and this thing has come on screen, we've also set that Boolean to true. So now when I look at this, I'm saying, is it open? Is it on screen? Yes. Okay, in that case, switch it to minus 100% again. Slide it off screen. And then just like the first scenario, we have to change the Boolean, right? So no matter what, whether it's coming onto the screen or coming off the screen, we have to change that Boolean because it's becoming what it was not. I think that makes sense.
I don't really get the minus 100%. If it's from the right, it's over here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me sketch for that one, which means I'm going to switch to my sketchy screen in the feed here. And that is tricky, you know, to this very day. That still regularly messes me up.
Is it saying like from the very right, dot 0 pixels?
Yeah.
So then minus 100?
Exactly. So if this is our page, and we've got that status, we've got that toolbar, and then we've got this filters right here. And we gave it a position fixed, right? So right means the absolute furthest right that we can go here, right? So the edge of the screen. Now, ordinarily with CSS properties, top, bottom, left, right, what we're saying is, you know, go to that edge, and then whatever value I give you, push away from. So if we say top 5 pixels, it's going to actually push this down 5 pixels. Now when we say right, had we said right, you know, 50 pixels, it would do the same thing, and it would try and push it off, you know, 50 pixels from there. But instead, what we're saying is a negative number. So a negative number forces it to move in that direction. And because that negative number was 100%, it's going to say, well, how wide am I? Okay, 240? In that case, push yourself over 240 pixels, which means it's going to line up exactly off screen. That's how the minus 100% is working. Now, maybe the freakier one is the 0. Right? Because when we set it to 0, we're saying, well, just don't push anywhere. But that means it's going to automatically plunk itself back in the corner there. And as long as we've set a transition property, that whole scenario will happen over time and thus achieve animation. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little tricky, right? I agree. It's a little unintuitive, I find, the wording. I find the whole thing unintuitive. I'd rather have X and Y positions, but that ain't how this works. So, yeah. So have you guys got your filter box coming on and off screen with that little bit?
I never an application like when I collapse it and it pops up.
Mm-hmm.
When I click it away again, it just remains gray. Like I can't see my status bar on the toolbar.
Are you positioned like below the toolbar? Let's try a little something. Can you copy your pen and post it on Basecamp for me? And I'm going to bring it up and we'll take a look at it. I want to try that out because then people who are on the stream could see what we're looking at, which would be pretty cool. I wonder if we have viewers right now.
Advertising.
Yeah. Make a few bucks. Don't forget to hit subscribe.
Donations are welcome.
Can you just go to the screen with that?
Yeah. Yeah. You're in the DA group, right? Yeah. Oh, you're in B. Ah, okay, let me jump over to B for a second here. Here we go. Wait, nope, that's not you. Did you post it already?
No, I'm just trying to get
Ah.
started.
Can you throw the professor link on there for me when I type it in? Does it seem to?
Oh yeah, sure. Oh shit. Ah, I just sent that to everybody in your class. Oh well. It won't hurt them to take a look.
Don't we just copy it on that?
Yep. You could make a new discussion and pop it in there. Good to go? Oh, sorry, you're in the DB, right? Let me
Yeah.
jump back there. Do. DB. And let's check it out. Bring that one up. And then I'm just going to bring it up for the stream as well. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Okay, so one thing I'm looking at here is, first off, nice styles. This is looking good, yeah. So right now, when I first arrived at the screen, this should probably be off screen. You know what I mean? So the first thing I would look at is, let's find the filters. And so we got position fixed.
CSS plugin before because I tried to plug in the 3 different pens into one,
Yeah.
but I don't think I put in the JavaScript properly. So, like my thing would collapse on the right hand side of my settings.
Okay.
And then when I hit blog and portfolio, they wouldn't collapse anymore.
Okay. Well, this could be a part of it.
I scrapped all that stuff, and this is all just your JavaScript from today's.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, so let's focus on the filter box here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is put a right property in there, and we'll go minus 100%. So boom. So that's off the screen now, right? But it is still there. It's just like we were talking about in the sketch. It's now like off the screen. So next thing I'm going to check is, do we have a click listener hooked up for this guy right here? So nothing yet. So first thing I would check is, I'm going to see, do you have jQuery? Yes, you do. Excellent. That's good. So now let's double check the selector of the filters. So let's go to the HTML, and I'm going to look for where we have that filters, right here. Okay. Aha. Dot filters. Okay, so right here we've got this identifier by class name, which is filters. And then the other thing I'm going to check is, do we have an ID for this little settings icon while we're here? So I'm going to go inside of the toolbar. Let me do a little search for toolbar. There we go. So there's the toolbar, and so there's our tools, and aha. So we do have an ID right here called settings. So now I'm going to check and see, do we have a click handler for settings? So let's see. Okay, so there is something a little unusual here. You have two copies of the ready function. So there's one here, but then there's another one down here. So that's more than we actually need. So I'm going to get rid of this one right here. And we're going to have an extra one of these in here somewhere. Oof, let me Control Z my way out of here. Where are you finishing? Yep. So that raises a good point. You really only ever want to have one ready listener like that. And then you're going to put all your stuff inside of it. Because that is basically saying, when the page is ready, execute everything else. So if anybody else has been doing that, then that's something to keep an eye on. Let's put a little console log in your click wait a minute. In your click handler here. So right here is where we're targeting the settings by ID. We know it's ID because we have the little pound sign. Let's put a little console log. So we can debug. Okay. And I'm actually going to fork your example here so that I can save and refresh. So I'm going to fork this. So now it's mine. It won't affect anything that you've got going on there. And I'm going to open the console.
So, did you already get rid of one of the...
I did not. I've left it because it's a little messy in there. First thing I'm going to do is see if, this click listener is working at all. Okay, so yeah, there are some issues in this outside of what we're doing right now. This one right here is saying that underscore is not defined. So that means the underscore library that you're using elsewhere, it ain't there.
So do I just go copy and paste it back in?
Let's see what we got here. Because you are loading the underscore library. So that looks okay. Basically, I think your problem is that you're a little bit ahead of us here. You're already incorporating everything all together, which is awesome, and that's totally what you're going to be doing. But there are some issues because you've basically taken the code from some of your other examples and then just kind of added on to it. So let's see how far we can get here. So for instance, like you've already got the templating stuff in here, which we haven't done yet. So I'm guessing that you got that from one of the examples that are on CodePen already. Let's see what we can do. Let me go jiffy quick here. I'm going to rip out a bunch of stuff. So let me get rid of this right here for a moment. Let me get rid of this, which means I can get rid of this. Okay, and then we've got one here. And get rid of all this. So it looks pretty good. Filter. What are we missing here? There. Save that. Hi-oh. Boosh. Yeah. So basically, you were just a little bit too far ahead of us. Some of the code in there is the stuff that we're writing during the remainder of this class, so you will be able to get there. But for now, grab this from this fork. I'm going to post this fork on Basecamp, and this will have you up and going.
I was trying to follow because I wasn't here last week, so I was trying to watch you on the stream.
Okay, so you must have gotten the stuff from the other class. Yeah, which is great, totally great, but we're recreating that right now. So this should be useful for you. So let me send you this. Anybody else want to take a look at their example they're working on right now? Anybody else having a problem that we can bring up? Yeah, man, post it on Basecamp. Post yours too. Yeah, let's take a look.
It'll be in the DB group though.
Okay. We'll
Sorry. Mine just, I just copied yours, but I don't know why it's not working.
okay. Well, we'll take a look. And then maybe we'll take a little break after we debug one or two of these. But I think it's helpful for us to all be looking at it together, right? Because typically if one person's having a certain problem, then more than one person is. So if we can figure it out together, that's pretty useful. All right, so let's take a look at what we got for Josh here. Let me bring this one up also in the stream.
It was working before, but now it just doesn't show up.
Okay. All right, let's see what we got.
It was showing up before, it didn't work.
So you're ahead of us as well on this.
Our class was ahead.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So I might pull some of that stuff out of there, but let's take a look here and see what we can figure out. So first thing I would generally do is bring up the console and take a look to see if it's serving us any errors. So let me refresh this page here. It's not serving us any errors, so that's okay. Let's see what we got going on here. So this little red icon down in here typically is going to show up if you've got something not closed in here. So let me fork this real quick, and I'm going to simplify this whole thing a little bit. So that's good. We're keeping that function there.
when you clicked right there, though, it came up red. Is that bad?
This red right here, yeah.
After when you clicked where a function was, if you scroll up a bit, when you click there, it shows it red.
Yeah, it could be there's no closing for this, right? So if I go all the way down here, but there is that, right? So that tells me that there's something not right with curly braces in here, I would imagine. So, so let's strip out some of the stuff that doesn't necessarily need to be in here. Here, let me share this fork so we can take a look at it together. I'm going to jump into professor mode. Copy this, send this out. Let's debug. All right, so I highly doubt that the issue is anything to do with the CSS here. That stuff's probably fine. So if I'm looking in here, let me strip out some of the stuff that we're not using right now. So I'm going to get rid of some of this dummy data here. I'm going to get rid of this compilation right here. I'm going to get rid of that loop. Strip that down, make this a little simpler. Could be we're missing a closing here. That's possible. So if you guys want, you can jump into this as well. And let's see if we can figure out what's going on here.
Should I delete as well or no?
Pardon me?
When I follow along with my actual thing, should I follow along? Like, I delete stuff as well.
Well, I've forked yours, so we're now into my shared session here. All right, bring up the JavaScript, bring up the HTML, close the CSS. Alrighty, so I'm going to get rid of some of this stuff here. Get rid of that. Still got a little red down here. So let me get rid of this. This is looking a little unusual, isn't it? See how there's all this spacing here? That's a little strange. But I don't think that's the problem. Oh, look at, we got dummy data here. I think we had 2 copies of that dummy data. Get rid of that. Okay, so now we're down into the area that we want. So we're saying settings, click, that's fine. Are you closed? Looks like it. So notice how there's a little underline there. There should be a corresponding underline, and that, tells us that that's closed. But we also have to check and make sure that inside of here these are closed. So that's open, that's closed, that's open, that's closed. That stuff looks pretty good to me. What about you? Let's get rid of all this Firebase stuff. Ah, that's what it was, man. Something inside of your Firebase code there is missing a closing curly brace or a closing round bracket. Let me Control Z this back again and see if we can find it. So what do we got here? So we're saying, that's a typo. That one there. So that could cause a problem. Let's fix that up real quick. Our base, but I don't think that would be it. I think we're more so looking at something not being closed, and I would say that's it right there, dude. Because see how it thinks the closing is actually the end of your whole ready function. So I would say that you need something like this and probably this. Oh, boosh. Yeah. So that one got nuked out of there somehow. Let me save this and fork it back at ya.
What was the thing you changed before that? 'Cause mine's still not popping up.
Well, look through this fork. Let me send that at you. Okay, and let me jump over to the DA group. Let's take a look at one more. I feel like debugging is pretty useful practice. And after we debug this one, we're going to take a little break because I need coffee. I am in serious jeopardy here. All right. Oh. Have you posted your pen?
Yes.
Oh. Where was it?
Wait,
Wait, are you in DB? Hmm. I didn't see it. Oh, it's like in a comment? Wait, I'm in the... Oh, this is Andrew Tedford's group. Hold on. My bad. Okay, so let's take a look and see what we got here. Okay, let's see what's up. So first off, do we have clicky action? No. Okay, so let me fork this. And let's debug. All right. We're going to fork it down. Okay, and let me bring it up in the stream as well. Alrighty. Okay, so first thing I'm going to check is, do we have jQuery? We do not. jQuery. So we add that. And then let's see what happens with this. Oh snap. Another satisfied customer. Yeah, there we go. That's what that one was. Otherwise, you're looking pretty good here. Okay, so do you guys want to take a quickie little break, and then we'll continue the example. We'll get our filters working, and we'll push on towards making the thing dynamic. So a couple of you guys are already ahead on that, so the rest of us will catch up. All right? Okay, break time. All right. Welcome back. Okie dokie. Shall we continue on?
Might as well.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so I was there last week. It was like a 7-minute lab. Yeah, so they'll still jump in.
Okay. So we got as far.
The lab was last week.
Let's go. We got as far as having the settings box slide in and out as we were wanting. And so the only thing that we need to accomplish in here is actually hooking up some mouse click listeners on our options here. So we've got, for me, I've got this blog option, and I've got this like second option that I'm going to turn into portfolio items. And what we want is to be able to click those on or off and have them appear or disappear inside of our little example here. So first off, let's take a look at the HTML. And I'm going to go to right here. Let's look inside of our filter options. So we've got a list in here, and it's got two options in it. And right here you can see I've put a little ID on there and given it a name. So I'm going to get a little bit more refined with this. I'm going to say ID equals like blog filter. Something like that. And then while I'm here, I'm going to hook up that second one as well. So name it something that makes sense for the filters you want to use. So I'm going to say portfolio filter. And then I'll just update this text so it makes a little more sense. So you've seen how we can target an element based on its ID and add a click handler to it, right? So the way that you would select it through jQuery is the exact same as if you were going to select it for styling. You know what I mean? So hashtag for an ID, dot for a class name. So if we jump into the JavaScript here, let's hook it up. So this is the area that we're looking at. So let's just do it really, really simple here. I'll get rid of this for the moment, and I'm going to say target which? I'm going to say target blog filter, right? So here's my ID, blog filter, and over here in the JavaScript, I'm going to target that. So we'll say blog filter, just like that. And then for the moment, let's just test it. Let's test it by putting an alert into here. You clicked the blog filter. This is usually how I will work, like one step at a time. So I'm not going to, do any of the CSS or anything in there yet. I'm just going to find out, like, can I actually click the thing? Is my selector correct? So I'll give that a save. And I'm going to bring this out and click on blog. And there I get my alert. Okay? So see if you can write a click handler for your second option there, which I have as portfolio. Go ahead and do it. You've seen how to do it for that first option. Can you do it for the second option? So another small little, ooh, what's going on here? Why am I getting red? Oh, look at that. A small little side point, what I like to do when I'm putting code comments in is at the end of it, I put my initials, right? Because let's say you're working on this with a couple other people and they're contributing code as well. Now I can search by t.w. and bring up all of the chunks that I put in there as my comments. Or if I'm working with someone else, I can search by their initials if they're doing the same thing. So it's a little handy trick that we use in the shop pretty often. Because typically it won't be just like a single developer working on something. There's going to be 2 or 3 people. And so this can be handy. Hands up who has their second filter showing an alert. 0? Nobody? Okay. I'll give you another second. So there's 2 parts to it. First is creating your selector, and then the next is filling in the content of the function. So if I was going to create a selector for that second option, what am I going to need? For sure, I'm going to need the ID, right? So if I look over here, I've got this second item in the list, and it has an ID called portfolio filter. So right over here, I can do something very similar to what I did for the blog filter. I can say jQuery, go and find by ID portfolio filter, just like that. And I can say click and put in my function, the action stuff that it should do. Okay? So let's throw another alert in there. You clicked the portfolio filter.
Is that semicolon after the 2 brackets just above 4 lines? Is that,
This one here?
is that,
Well, it's a subject of much debate. Developers argue about it all the time. The reason why is because you almost never need the semicolon in JavaScript, but there are 1 or 2 cases where it's crucial, which is terrible. A language should never be like that. So it's really up to you if you want to put them in or not. A lot of developers are adamant about not using them because generally in code, you don't want to put stuff in there that doesn't need to be there. I guess I'm kind of the worst of all where I put them in if I think of it. Yeah, it's not the best. You should either be consistent or don't put them in.
I'm just gonna not put that. Until it tells me.
Yeah. Usually, they don't matter. Behind the scenes, if it's not there, the browser puts them in.
It's like the ones on like the alert and stuff like that. Those have to be there, right?
Nope.
No?
But they should be. Yeah. Question?
When I hover over my filters, the cursor goes from the arrow to the eye. Which I never noticed before. Is it always done?
You can set that, actually. There's a cursor property that you can go to. You get a bunch of values. So if you want to have the little pointy finger, then you can set the cursor value to pointer. So if we wanted, for instance, to make all of the items in our list in here, you bring up the pointer, then we could do something like say go into the filters, and then look for any unordered list and any list items, and set their cursor to pointer. And now we get the little hand there. That's a good point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that little eye highlighter line is, it can make people feel like their cursor disappeared because it's so hard to see. Whereas the pointer is going to let them know, okay, you can actually click that stuff. Excellent point.
And then if you wanted to do that over the settings, you could just go over the settings and have it save filter.
Bingo. Yes. So let's see if my portfolio is working. Yes. Click the portfolio filter. So we mentioned that, the easiest way of all to get rid of or filter out our blog items or our portfolio items would probably be just to set them display none, right? So let's do it like the easiest way possible first, and we'll just nuke them with a display none. If that's working, then we'll go back, we'll make it a little bit nicer, and we'll have them shrink and collapse like we want them to do. So to do that, let me take a look in the HTML, and let's see what we got here. Well, so I'm going to look for the feed items, and I've got one here called blog post. And what else have I got here? This one is nothing. This one's nothing. This one's nothing. Okay, so let's work with it a little bit here. So blog post, that's a little bit too wordy for me. I'm going to shorten that. So right here in line 30, where I've got this div that is a feed item, I'm going to change that to have a class called blog. Now let's see if we can just get some styling on that. Oh, feed item, feed item. Okay, so there's all our feed item stuff. Okay, so then we're going to change this and get rid of that display none right there. There we go. So now I'm styling the blog items to have the color red. So see if you can turn the first item in your feed into a blog post. So I did two things. Inside the div for the feed item, I added in another class called blog. And in the CSS, I've created a rule to set the color red on blog items. So what that means is that any of these posts that I add the blog class to should turn red. So let's say I skip one, and I add it into the next one. So blog. And now it's red. But I was going to skip one. So let me go down to the next feed item. And I'll make this one a blog post. So now we're skipping one, and it's red down here. So we've got a way now of distinguishing these activity items, and we've got a way to turn some of them into blog posts. We've also got a click handler when we click on this filter. So our next task would be to go in there and change it from an alert into something that would make the blog posts disappear. Okay, so let's go into the JavaScript where we've got this alert being thrown. And right here is where that alert is being thrown when we click on this blog item right here. So instead of doing that, what we're going to do is use jQuery to target the same way that we did with our CSS. Okay? If you look at your CSS, how are you targeting the blog posts? You're using the class name, and then you're setting color red. So we're going to use the exact same selector inside of JavaScript now. But instead of setting the color to red, we're going to set the display to none. Okay? So to do that, jQuery gives us a really nice option here where we can say .css and then in quotes the property that we want to change, and then you put a comma and what we want to change it to. So I'm saying, you know, select all of the items that have the class blog and set their display to none. So if I expand this out, boosh, they're gone. In there? Does that kind of make sense? It's just a little bit more creative use of what we've already been doing. You know what I mean? Like everything we've done there, we've done in CSS before. We've set display none, we've selected by class. But the difference here is that now we can put a bit of logic around it. We can have it trigger based on some kind of interaction from the user. And that is where, you know, JavaScript comes in. That's the role of JavaScript, basically. Okay, so then I have a challenge for you in two parts. The first part is I want to see some of these in green. And to do it, I want you to use the class name portfolio. See if you can do that. So if you're thinking it through, you're going to have to go into the div called feed item and give it a new class, right? The same as we did for blog, right? So you're going to have to give it a new class, and I want you to call that class portfolio. Next part of it, you're going to have to make a CSS rule that can turn those green. So what I would suggest is look at how you did it for blog. It turned things red. Now we want to turn things green. And if you're thinking ahead, you can see where this is going. Because if you can get that working, then you're going to be able to hook up this button and make portfolio items disappear as well. Ooh, this looks good.
I wanted to do this.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I can't get it to work.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And do you see the alert?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Then I'd say it's probably the CSS. Yeah, so first off, have you added a new class to the items that should be latest? So it looks like you've got .latest here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good. So in your HTML, have you added latest to any of your feed items? Let's see. So there's feed item latest.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I would do just to test it, I'd make a CSS rule and have it turn latest like red or something, just so we can see, which ones it thinks is correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe give it color red or something. So the first one is latest, definitely. Okay, good. So let's take a look at that JavaScript again. Mm-hmm. This looks pretty good. Double check the spelling on this Boolean, I wonder.
I think my brackets.
Oh, yeah, you may be onto something there. Yeah.
Oh, but then it says. It says check it there. So those are correct. Those are there.
It looks okay, but there's definitely something funky in there.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet you that's not supposed to be there.
This one?
Yeah, I'm guessing. Hey-oh! There we go. Yeah, so you might be good. Now, the other thing I'd do is check your Booleans up top
Yeah.
and make sure, that
Yeah.
spelling matches.
Yeah, it does.
It looked okay, yeah.
So then
Yeah. So let's, oh no, you still need that.
why do
Yeah.
I need those ones?
Because that one is closing your ready function, this top
yeah,
here.
I forgot about
Yeah.
that.
That's like the outside of the Big Mac. Uh-huh. Hey, there you go.
So basically,
That's looking
okay.
good.
Okay,
Can
so-
you put this up
yeah,
on
because
Basecamp?
I closed it here before, and then I added this one, but I added it outside of the function, the main function. Okay.
Can you give it a save and put your pen on Basecamp? I want to bring it up.
Are we going over how to get them back after?
Yes. Yes. How's that going? Who's got green portfolio items? Anybody on this side? Yes? Good, good.
But my portfolio button is not working.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, but
Do you see the alert for the portfolio button? Ah, then check the ID in the HTML for that list item. Could be you didn't create an ID yet. That would be what I'm thinking of. The first thing I would check would be this right here, to see if that ID matches what you're targeting in your JavaScript. Because at the very least, you should see the alert. So double check your spelling on this one and make sure that that matches this. And make sure you're targeting by ID and not class. Does that seem okay? Let's take a look. Typo? Typo? Yes. Yeah. It gets everybody. I guess that would have gone into DB, right? Oh, it's into DA? I totally lose track. Sorry. So I just wanted to bring this up because that's a nice example. So here, there we go. So a third item has been added in here, right? And it's pretty much the exact same. Ooh, why I have only one? Hold on. Oh, I see what's going on here. Uh-huh. I'm going to say this is some funkiness with the positioning. I would say something probably is positioning maybe absolutely, and thus trying to get its information from the Chrome rather than the window here. Let me open this in debug mode. There. So here we go. So in here, we've now got 3 items, right? So that's going to nuke blogs. This is going to nuke latest news. So there's really no end of how many of these filters that you're going to be able to put in. I'll take another look at that one after and see what's up with that. Oh, okay. Anybody still working on getting the portfolio item green? Okay. You know what? Copy this URL, throw it on Basecamp. Let's check it out. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking, guys. So the first one I'm going to leave as blog. I'm going to look for the next feed item. And I'm going to change it. I'm going to turn one of them into portfolio. So there's the first one, feed item blog. And this second one, I'm going to turn that into portfolio. So with this arrangement, what I'm saying is this is a feed item. So it should keep all the properties of a feed item. It'll keep the same height and all that kind of stuff. But in particular, this item should be a portfolio. So I have to write another CSS rule now that will change it to green. So I got to bring back my CSS, jump down to the bottom, and I'll say dot portfolio color green. Come on, you.
Oh, if we were doing this like this type of thing, wouldn't we want to display the ones that we're clicking instead of dipping?
It depends how you want to do it, right? If you want the person to, like, say it's a recent activities, you'd probably want to display all of them. If you're doing it more like, categories or something like that, you could decide what is the most important category. Yeah, I don't think there's a downside to having them all show when the person first arrives, and then letting them filter it.
Yeah.
But I guess it would depend what use you're putting the feed to.
I
Yeah.
was just thinking like if they wanted, the specific posts from specific things, you'd want to click blog and it would show all the blog posts as opposed to.
Yeah. in that case, I'd even be tempted to have the settings on the screen when they arrive, so that they know they can do that. You know, that might be a good thing to do. So, yeah. For me, I'm thinking of like an activity feed. So I'm probably going to show them all and then let them filter it, but totally up to you.
How would you do it if you were trying to, like, is there a ton more steps?
No. If you wanted to do it the other way around, well, you change your filters box right property to 0 pixels so that it's on screen by default. You'd want to change your Boolean to say that it is open. You'd change it to true. Other than that, your settings button would now be hooked up, and that would work just fine.
Well, I mean, in the JavaScript, what would you do to, like, because it wouldn't be display none.
Right, exactly. You'd have to reverse what we're about to do next. So the next thing we're going to do is basically turn these into toggle so that you can bring it back again. Exactly. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to do the next step, which is to have my portfolio items go away as well. So I've got my click listener right here. So I'm going to replace the alert for this with something that will get rid of portfolio items. So this can be almost the exact same as what we did with the blog here. So I'm going to get rid of the alert, and instead I'll say, hey, jQuery, select everything with the portfolio class. And change its display property to none. Okay, so now if I click portfolio, it's gone too. So we can nuke all the blog items, we can nuke the portfolio items, but we should probably be able to bring them back, right? Otherwise they're just gone. You'd have to reload the page. So what we're describing basically is a toggle. Our settings button here is also a toggle, isn't it? Right? It's just like a switch. Click it on, click it off, and a filter works the same way. So similar to how we needed a Boolean to keep track of whether the filters box was open or not, we're going to need Booleans now to keep track of whether those filters are turned on or off. So you're going to give yourself 2 Booleans, one for the blog, one for the portfolio items. So it could look like something like these. Var blog filter on equals false. Var portfolio filter on equals false. And so we're going to use those little variables to keep track of what should happen when you click that button. So since we're doing logic, you can probably expect we're going to need an if statement in there. So if we're just to say it in plain language, we'd say it's something like, you know, if the filter is on, turn it off. Else, turn it on. I'll say that one more time. We're going to say, if the filter is on, turn it off, else turn it on. Right? That else is the only tricky part of it, right? The else only happens if the first thing we said isn't true. Working with JavaScript is like that guy from The Princess Bride. With the guy with the riddles, and he's got the poison in the drink. Remember that? Oh man, if you haven't seen that scene, you gotta watch it. It's classic. Okay, so see if you can do it. All right, try and tackle that. I'm gonna bring up your example. We're gonna take a look and see what's going on there. I want you guys to take a crack at hooking up this little Boolean with an if statement. Try to get it working just for the blog. Okay? Get your if statement in, take a crack at it. Look at what we've done for the settings box itself and see if you can do something similar for the blog items now. Block. Yeah. Or basically the opposite is anything else than none. But I'd go block. Yeah. Because these feed items, they are block-like. Yeah. So let me bring up this example here. And let's see what we got. Okay. So I am seeing a little red action over here on the JavaScript. Let's see. Okay, first things first. I'm going to check for jQuery. And yep, we're all good on that. So that's all cool. Let me give myself a little room here. And let's take a look. So my first guess, if I start scrolling down here, and that's still there, is that there probably is an issue with one of these closing things, is kind of what I'm thinking. But not to assume. First thing I'm going to do is look in the console and see if it's giving me any hints. And let me reload this. No hints at all. Absolutely useless. Okay, but that even more, like that does tell me something. That tells me that it probably has to do with a closing brace somewhere. So let's take a look here. This looks all good to me. Oh, look at that. So this is showing up red, which is even more evidence to me that it doesn't think this is the closing for the ready function. So somewhere in here, we're missing something. So let's break it down. I'll give a little more space here. This variable looks pretty good to me. And then we've got jQuery adding a click handler to this option right here. Let's see. So I'm looking at the underscores here. And so it's highlighting here and here. It does see a close there, so that's probably all right. Then let's take a look here. So then we've got blog filter and an open and a close there. That looks like that's properly closed to me. Oh, aha. So check this out, Janan. We've got a ready function here and another one up here. You only really need one ready function. All your instructions can all go, like all your click handlers, everything, can just go in one. So I'm betting that this doesn't need to be here. Boom! Yeah, baby. That's looking good to me. Yep. So let me just fork this and fire this back at you. See if this is closer to what you're trying to do. So I'm actually going to put a little note here because that's 2 or 3 times now that this bug has come up. So important. You only need one ready function. Its job is just to know when the page is ready to work with and should look like so it's like all the instructions. Okay, so that final, closing braces, that should be the last thing that you see in there. It closes everything, the whole thing. So all of your instructions, everything we want to do, goes inside of here, which means we only ever have one of these opening functions here. So if you wind up with a couple of them in there, you could have problems on that. There we go. Another happy customer. All right. So how you guys making out with that? You got the got some stuff happening there? Okay, so let me join in with you there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the blog filter button into a toggle. So it's got to do two different things now. It's either got to make the blog items disappear or make them appear again. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to make use of this little Boolean that I created up here called blog filters open. So right down in my click handler, let me go to the blog filter. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to need that if statement, right? So I'm going to say if blog filter on and so see how it automatically puts in a closing bracket for me, which is a convenience, but in this case that doesn't really help me because I have to put the closing bracket after the CSS command. And I'll put a little tab here so it's easier to look at. Okay, so this is kind of half the equation. The other half is, what should I do if that isn't the case? So this is where our else statement comes in. So the else has to come right after your closing brace there. And it needs its own curly braces. And so again, we'll say, find the blog items and change their CSS, particularly the display property, and we'll change it to block. Okay, so anybody can tell me what am I missing inside of that code block right now? There was one more thing that we had to do in there. Exactly, yeah. If we don't change a Boolean value, none of this is going to work. Blog filter on equals true. And then down in the else, blog filter on equals false. What's going on? Blog filter, blog. Did I spell this right? Blog filter on. Oh, I've got this backwards. When you first arrive, this should be true. Because when you first arrive, they are visible. So let me try that again. There we go. So this part worked, the display none that we see in line 9 there. Now what happens if I click it again? What's going on?
I have mine, well, I have mine, all my variables are false, and then I do the first Boolean is false, and then the second one, the else is true.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we did. That's what's in the other.
Yeah.
What's in the sidebar there.
That should work. I'm not sure why I'm not getting my second one here. Let me put an alert in here. And there. Hey, what's going on? Fog filter on. And bring up my console. What? Oh, wait a minute. What about you guys? Have you got this working? Then clearly I've got something wrong here. Let's give myself more information. Okay. Did I close the function? Yep, looks like it. Let me bring up my console again. And dock it to the bottom. Okay. Bring this out. Okay. Click the blog filter. That's all good. That's weird. Oh, God. Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much just what you exactly said to me. Yeah. Yeah. Ah. Yeah. Well, let's find out, actually. I'm curious. And clearly I'm a glutton for punishment, so. And that's okay, yeah. I think if I changed it up here to false, I might have to click twice the first time. Man. Booleans, eh? Jeez. Oh, Booleans. So let's look at this whole chunk here. So we've got our Boolean, which is keeping track of whether we've turned the blog filter on or off. Then we've got our straight up click listener for when we're clicking this blog button down here. Okay? Don't really need this console log anymore. But in here, we're doing, kind of a classic logic problem here, where we're saying, if that Boolean is set to true, then make the blog items be display none. Otherwise, like they called it else, you could substitute that with the word otherwise. You know what I mean? It means exact same thing. We're saying, if this filter's on, then make these guys disappear. Otherwise, do this stuff down here. And the reason why we have to change the Boolean is because we changed the value. And the Boolean is what's keeping track of that value, whether those items are showing or not. All good? That make sense? Anybody want to take a look at their thing? Guys got it working? If you got it working for the blog, you know what I'm going to ask next. Portfolio. Make it work for the portfolio items. So if you were able to make, another one of these items turn green by targeting it with portfolio, then you should be able to get your JavaScript working. I'm going to give you a second to work on that. Because, at some point you got to fly. You boot your ass out of the nest. And then you go fly or crash in a bloody mess. Very graphic, I know.
How do I fix this mess here?
The positioning stuff? Okay. So have you got this whole thing inside a div maybe called like feed or something like that?
I have it inside. I have everything inside.
In the all holder, okay. And then, but the all holder's around everything. So then let's go down a little bit.
So then, this shouldn't be here then.
That's very possible. It may be getting pushed down past that. But you might need to put that ending right on the end there, yeah, right after body holder, I would say.
Oh yeah, this is all over.
Yeah, that might be it. You're on the right path. It's definitely your markup. Yeah, keep plugging on that. Yeah, I know you're gonna find it. Don't forget too that you can always right click and look into the elements, which can be, if you go inspect element, yeah. Then as you move around in the elements, you can highlight them. So maybe expand all holder and just see where it thinks that stuff is. So there's the body holder, that's good. And there's that, and there's toolbar, and that all looks fine. But right about down, so here's your feed right here. So what does it think? So that's like squashed way up there, yeah. So. But it is there. It's just something not quite right there. Could be. Could be a position property. Anybody manage to get their portfolio filter working? Anybody? 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 I see one. Anybody else? Anybody else? I feel like you're probably very close. Do you have jQuery? Oh, burn. Sorry. Couldn't help it. Oh man. Okay, let me jump in there as well. So if you're having a problem with the second filter, I'm almost certain it's a typo, because what we're going to do is almost the exact same. You could almost cut and paste, but let's not do cut and paste. Let's actually work it out here. So now I'm working with portfolios. I'm going to go up here, and so there's my blog filter. Here's my portfolio filter. So I'm going to set this to true, like I did with the blog. Then I'm going to go into the click handler for the portfolio. You did. Excellent. And I'm going to start with the if statement there. So I'm going to put my Boolean in there. Portfolio filter on. Now I should mention a little convention with coders. Some of this stuff I do without really thinking, just because I've done it for so long. But typically with a variable name, they'll use what they call this camel case syntax for the variable name, where it starts with a lowercase letter, but then the other major words get an uppercase like that. So that's why I have the lowercase p and the uppercase F and O inside of here. Developers do that just so that if they're scanning through code really quickly, they can easily say, oh, that's a variable, that's a variable, that's a variable. And they do it by identifying what they call that camel case syntax like that. So if you use that syntax, you're going to look a little more pro styles. Then you're going to have my curly braces, because we always need those. And I'm going to move that curly brace that's closing down here. And I like to get my tabbing in there so that it, lines up nicely like that. Then I'm going to put my else in and write my other scenario here. And I'll set it to display block. Okay. And then the one other thing that we need to do in there is change the Boolean. Portfolio filter on equals false. And then down in here, portfolio filter on equals true. I think this is pretty good. Let me give it a go. Yeah, baby. And they both work. So I can turn on and turn off both blog and portfolio filters. So this is getting pretty good. So let's walk through it. From the top, I have my plain vanilla filter or feed item there, and I have my buttons set up. So step number 1 in the HTML. What did I have to do for the feed item that I want to turn into a portfolio item?
It's you gotta add the div name.
You were right on it. I'm adding a class
Right.
to the
So
div.
you add the class to the div.
Yeah.
And then you tell the CSS basically what you want it to do by targeting it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So let's go step by step. So we add the class to the feed item, right? Then in my CSS, I wanted to turn the portfolio item green. So how do I do that? So we're kind of going step by step in this process. So we wanted to turn one of these items into a portfolio item. So the first thing we did was add portfolio to the feed item in the HTML class names. So now it's feed item space portfolio. So now I want to turn it green. What's my next step?
The CSS guy dot audio.
Exactly, perfect. So if that works, then we know that everything is okay with our CSS selector. We're targeting the right area. So in our JavaScript, we can use that same selector for doing other things, like setting the display on or off, right? So in the JavaScript, our next step is to take that same selector that we used to turn this green and use it inside of a jQuery selector. So I'm saying .portfolio CSS, and then I can change any CSS property I want dynamically here. So I'm setting the display to none, which is making it disappear. Now the rest of it is just straight up logic. We are making one Boolean variable. A Boolean has only two values, true or false. That's it. That's all we really need for a toggle, if you think about it, right? It's on or off. It's like a light switch. Same idea. So we're making use of that Boolean to keep track whether the person has clicked this or not. Okay? So if they've never clicked it before, when they first click it, we're going to make the item disappear. After that, if they click it again, we're going to make it reappear, come back. Okay? And that's basically the basis of a toggle. We're doing the exact same thing for both blog items and portfolio items here. So, my next challenge. I want to know whether these have been turned on or turned off. I want to apply some CSS styling to these items here. So if I've clicked to turn off, if I'm filtering out the blog items, I want you to turn that red. This text right here, I want that to turn red. Dun, 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 dun. I'm going to turn the feed on you guys. You're now on YouTube. Do something cool. We need more hits. So this one might be a little trickier than, when I say trickier, it's because it's probably a little simpler than what you're thinking about. Let me have a go. Better. Okay. Just checking on the feed. Okay. So right up in here, we've seen how we can change CSS using jQuery. So inside of the blog filter here, I'm actually going to use the exact same targeter, exact same selector that I used for adding a click handler. And I'm going to use that and change the CSS to update the color property. So if I just actually, take this chunk here, well, I know that's the right selector because that is the selector that our mouse click handler has been added to. So I'm going to say, ID blog filter CSS color, comma, red. There we go. I'll bring this out and boom. She red. It's not so bad, right?
I turned red on the second click.
Sounds like some Boolean action, doesn't it? Now, if I can do that, I should be able to also turn it back white again, right? So I go into the else. Let me get rid of this alert. I don't need that anymore. I'll make it white. Red means it's gone. White means it's back again. Lovely. By now, you know what I'm going to ask you to do. Going to get you to do the same thing for the portfolio button there. So here's what the whole blog filter chunk looks like now.
Now mine will turn red on the first click, but won't disappear till it's at.
Uh-huh. That's definitely a logic problem there. Double check your booleans, double check what your default is in the beginning. I'm using true. So right here, I'm checking if it's true. That's when I turn it red, and that's when I make it display none, which means I have to change the variable to false. Just like that, and like that, like that, like that. Let me go ahead and update the portfolio button as well. Then I might get a URL from you, and we'll take a look at it. Because I bet you lots of people will have a Boolean problem. Okay, so right in here, let's do the same. I'm going to say, jQuery, get me the portfolio filter, which is the button that you just clicked on, and change its CSS to set the color to red. Whoops, in quotes, red. Just like that. And down here, same thing, but we're going to set it to white. So that's the portfolio filter. We set the CSS color to white. Now, I'm doing something pretty simple here, right? With the, setting the color to red or color to white. But if you're sort of thinking ahead, for instance, you could have like a little checkbox or something beside there, and using CSS, have that checkbox show checked or not checked. Lots of cool stuff you can do. We're doing it the simplest way, but you'll have time to really do up nice styling for this stuff. So let's see if I got it. Portfolio. Yeah! And they'll both work at the same time, which is totally awesome. Okay. So let me give that a save. And then you still having that problem?
Yeah.
Give me a URL. Let's nail it. Who's got this working? For reals, show of hands. Who's got this working? Guys. Dude, beside you there? Yo, man, you got this working? Okay, cool. You got this working? Okay. Give me a URL. Throw it on Basecamp. I love it when shit's not working. Let's figure it out. Go to projects, and are you logged in with the same?
Should be. It gave me two options when I logged in to like either go to Oddly or mine.
Oh, go to Oddly. Yeah.
Know how to get there from here.
I think if you click on Basecamp itself. Oh wait, yeah, up there. Yeah. So click that one, and then yeah. Exactly. So what's cool is like, let's say you start your own business or whatever,
Right.
you're good to go.
Okay.
And then you can add people onto yours. So like, if I did work for you, I can sign in under yours, and now that's your project, which is pretty good. So I've got 2 students right now who are doing a bit of commercial work for Oddly, and they can use their exact same login, but then just log into the project under Oddly, and they're up and running. So. Not lying. This stuff is used very commonly. Perfect. Let's check it out. Let's see what we got here. Okay, I'm going to bring it up on the feed also.
I was trying to change the original one, the original variable that you used.
Oh, shit. I just got... just give me 1 second. Clicked the wrong link. There we go. And let's bring this up. Okay, good. So you were saying?
Yeah, just having troubles getting it to work.
Okay, let's take a look here.
I was
So.
trying to put it as true on the variable to test what you did, but
Okay, so let's see what happens here. So we got blog.
click it again and it'll disappear.
Okay, got it. Oh, okay, yeah, there's definitely some logic stuff here. So, okay, so blog on is set to true. So down in here, we're saying display none. Oh, look at that. I think you've got an extra one here.
Well, when I deleted that, it didn't delete the post.
Uh-huh.
It didn't have the post.
Okay, I see what's going on here. I think this is reversed. Yeah. So I'm going to get rid of this one. And then down in here, we're going to use this to set to none. And this to set to block, like that. And then, so up here we're saying if this is true, so setting to false, that's good. And then that would make this correct. So let me fork this and give that a try. Close, very close. So if blog on, it does look like we've got the right behavior on the button itself,
Yeah.
so that's
It
good.
works completely fine without the color stuff.
Oh, snap.
Oh, snap.
Yes. There we go. And that one, and that one. Lovely. Let me send you this back. Another save. All right. Now we're going to take a look at Let's take a look what Junon's got going here. He's clearly got a little bit of frustration happening. Let's see what we can figure out. I can bring that up on the feed also. All right. So let me fork this right off the bat and share it back so I can jump into professor mode. Fork it down. I'm gonna go to professor. There we go. Send this back. This is how I should do it so that people on the feed could join in if they want. There we go. So did you get a email right now, John, with this link in it? So I should be sending you a link to a professor mode session that I'm in right now. Okay, cool. So let's see what we got here. So I got to do it, man. I no insult intended. I'm just checking. Is jQuery there? Yes. Okay. So that's all good. All right. So now let's take a look in here and see, is this working? Yup. That's looking pretty good. Does it close? Nice. So now I'm going to click on blog and that's interesting. Okay, so I clicked twice. And then on the second one, I had this alert show up. So that makes me think that we might be looking at a Boolean issue. So I'm going to close the CSS. I probably don't need that open. And let's take a look. So we've got this blog filter on, set to true. That's all good. So in here, there's our click handler. We're saying if the blog filter is on, oh, ha ha, ha 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 ha. I think you're missing a line, dude. Check this out. jQuery select the blog items and CSS them to display none. I think otherwise you're good here. See what I mean? I think you were just missing this one line here. Because you've got this one down here that makes them come back. But we didn't have this one that gets rid of them in the first place. So let's see how that's working now. I think this is probably working. So let's double check now if you actually have any blog items in your feed. So I'm going to go in the HTML and look and see if any of your feed items have a class called blog. So right over here, let's bring back that CSS. So let's go to the feed. So we're in the feed now. Ah, look at that, dude. It's called blog post rather than blog. So let's correct that. So now it's blog. Oh, look at that. It turned red. Okay, so now I bet you that's going to work. If we click this, and we click that, and we click that. Like butter. Yep. Just a class name. That's what that problem was. So I will bounce out of professor mode and back into editor. And then I'll send you this so you can take a look at that. That makes sense, Jenna? What we're doing there?
Yeah.
So it was two things. The first one was you need that CSS line to make it disappear in the first place. And then the other was the selector was not right because it was called blog post rather than just blog. Yeah. Very good. Okay. So how much time do I have? Like like negative. Yeah. Okay, so just let me show you just one thing real quick here. I'm going to go back into this professor mode session here. And so rather than going display none, I'm going to change the height property, right? Because that's what's going to make it animate and squish down nicely like that. So rather than saying display none, I'm going to say height 0 pixels, just like that. And then instead of saying display block, I'm going to say height, and then I believe it was 100 pixels was the value we were after, just like that. So now, if I select portfolio, I'm missing one thing, which is the overflow property. Overflow hidden, like that. There. And she work like she work. And we'll do the same thing with the blog, right? So instead of saying display none, you're going to say height 0 pixels, or height 100 pixels. And the only reason why it's not animating because I don't have my transition property in there, right? So if I just go like this, transition on the height, 0.3 seconds. Nice, right? It's pretty sweet. I'm sorry, I always wind up going fast at the end. But if you had the display none stuff working, then this should get you where you want to go. So, and it's saved, so you can check that out. Okay, so we did not quite get as far as templating and making this thing dynamic. So next week we'll be doing a little bit of work on that. There is an example in the Oddly Studios team page there, which is from the other class. The other class is one class ahead of you guys. So you could take a look at that if you like. That's got pretty much everything working in terms of templating. But templating is really important, so we are going to go over it together, and we'll do a good class on that. Super, super important stuff. Alrighty, and with that, you can stay if you want. It's up to you. If you're having fun, I can keep going. Actually, no, I guess I can't. There's another class here. So, but yeah, good thing with CodePen, it's there for you. So check it out. And the feed, we'll see how well the feed worked. But most of what I talked about today should be on YouTube if you go to the link that I sent out for that feed. So, all good. See you guys.
Latest old